Hello and welcome to Friday Live. I am your host, Strata lawyer Amanda Farmer. We're going out live to the Your Strata Property Facebook page. We're going out to LinkedIn, out to YouTube. How are you doing on this gorgeous first day of spring? Spring has sprung. Here we are. It's been a beautiful day where I am. I hope it's been the same for you. This is Friday Live. This is our opportunity to catch up on the week in Strata, the week that has been. What's been going on, keeping us interested, keeping us busy, challenging us, where perhaps might we have had some success, had some wins to celebrate for the week. That's what Friday Live is all about. I have my light at the moment in exactly the wrong spot, shining right into my eyes. So I'm just fixing that one. We'll see how we go. Try not to send myself blind. I was online a lot last week. I delivered 3 training webinars in the space of 3 days, some member calls, some podcast recordings, and as well as being in front of this screen, I was oftentimes in front of these lights that I have on to make sure that you can see me, that I'm coming through clearly, and it's not great for our eyes to be staring at those lights. So I'm in recovery, and I'm going to continue to be for a little while, I think. If you're coming on in, joining us live, please do say hello. I can see your comments that are posted on Facebook and on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So if you're here live and want to say hi, I always like to hear from you. I know that we have a lot of new people following the page, new people who are getting our emails now, and definitely lots of new members inside our online community. So for those of you who perhaps are first timers here on live, I want to say a special hello to you. If you want to let me know in the comments here that you're here, please feel free. Cheryl is here saying hello and happy Friday. Lovely to have you with us, Cheryl, and thank you as always for the flowers. I hope you're having a happy Friday as well. What are we covering today? Well, I'm going to have a quick revisit to our webinar that we did have this time last week about NCAT, the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal. I heard from so many of you who enjoyed that webinar and found it really, really helpful. I have a special event to give you the details of. This will be the first time that I am sharing the details of that event with you here on live. So I want to make sure that you know all about that one. We're going to have a quick visit to the topic for this week's podcast, or one of the hot topics for this week's podcast. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and look at some media about Strata that has been flying around this week. There's been a particular story in the media with a certain, perhaps in our circles, controversial point of view. And I'd be interested to know what you think on that topic. So that's where we're heading today. We may be here for close to an hour. We will see how we go. Kristen is here saying happy Friday. How you doing, Kristen? Patrina saying hello. Enjoyed your last webinar. Awesome. So good to hear. Thank you, Patrina. Petra's here trying her new Apple. Cool. Is that an Apple phone that you're trying, Petra? How am I coming through there? Or a new Apple Mac, perhaps? I work off a Mac. So should you need any assistance, ask my support team. They know how to work my Mac devices. Kareem is here saying happy first day of Spring Friday. Happy first day of Spring Friday to you too, Kareem. Angela is here saying hi, and hi to everybody. Lovely. Thank you for joining us, Angela. If you are not catching us live but catching the replay, I would love for you to say hi as well. I always come back around and see those comments later on in the evening or later in the week. So feel free to drop me a hello if you're catching the replay. Petra's got a new MacBook Air. That is what I'm working on too, Petra. Really great for traveling. And I'm going to be doing a little bit of that from this weekend. I'll tell you about that towards the end of today's chat. Emiliana is here saying that NCAT webinar was indeed helpful. Thank you, Amanda. Hello and cheers. Hello and cheers to you, Emiliana. Great to have you all here live with me. Well, speaking of the NCAT webinar, we're calling it the NCAT webinar. The official name of the webinar was the Strategic Strata Litigator, where I shared over 90 minutes how to navigate NCAT end-to-end without expensive legal fees, even if you've lost faith in the system. And I know so many of you who are tuning in now were here this time last week tuning into the webinar. I was really blown away by the number of people who registered for that webinar, and then even more blown away by the number who were actually on the webinar live. Now, if you know anything about delivering webinars, hosting webinars, if you're kind of in that space, it is very unusual to get more than 50% of people who register for the webinar actually turning up to the live webinar. A lot of people now think, oh, I'll just catch the recording, I'll catch the replay, there'll be one. I'm used to webinars. Friday afternoon, often a difficult time to be hanging about online, learning about Strata. But we had well over 50%. We had closer to 60 to 65% of those who registered, hundreds who registered, and around 60 to 65% turning up live online, which was amazing. So we had a really great crowd here last week, and I know so many of you were part of it. Thank you for being there. Michelle is here saying good afternoon. Hey, Michelle, how are you? During our time together on the NCAT webinar, Strategic Strata Litigator webinar, I revealed the 5 most common mistakes that I see self-represented strata owners making with their NCAT applications. I talked about the unique role that costs and insurance have to play in strata litigation and how they can actually, in my experience, direct the outcome of a case, and how you can best avoid getting trapped in the litigation web altogether. I talked a lot about how NCAT proceedings I see are commenced too early by our owners before they're really ready to get to that level, and many cases don't need to get to that level. They can and should be resolved earlier. And in the feedback that I'm getting in my inbox and on the page and in the chat during the webinar, that's really something that is resonating with those who were there, making sure that you really set yourself up for success before commencing those tribunal proceedings. So you were all very, very excited about the bonuses that I had on offer last week and after the webinar. Bonuses going out to our members and those new members who were joining us. That was access to my NCAT vault. Lots of resources, templates, sample documents there in the vault for you that you can rely on when you are preparing your own NCAT case or understanding how to navigate proceedings that you might already be in. We welcomed a ton of new members into our online community since the webinar, and that offer closed at midnight on Tuesday to get access to the NCAT vault if you are a member. So if you're new in our community and you're coming around to Friday Live, feel free to give me a hello. There's lots of you checking out the forum and accessing the resources and getting support from Rochelle and Mina to navigate your way around the platform. So welcome, welcome. We are a broad, happy, sharing and caring community at Your Strata Properties. So we are thrilled to have you here with us. And if you are a member and you have accessed those NCAT Vault resources, you've had a look at some of my sample documents and my templates. There was in particular a template there for cost submissions, a costs application before NCAT and cost submissions. I was looking at that template myself a couple of days ago as I was drafting yet another application for costs and cost submissions for a client. And there's a lot of detail in there. I can see how that will be helpful to so many of you. So if you've managed to go over and have a look in the NCAT Vault, look at some of those member calls, and you're getting some help from that, do let me know. I'm always wanting to hear how these resources are being used by you, if they're helpful to you, what other resources you might need, and what I can do to help improve your experience of strata living. So this NCAT tidal wave sort of commenced a few weeks ago, where a number of you here on live said, Amanda, can you do a session on NCAT end to end? How do we do it? What are the things we have to look out for? How do we win our cases? How do we avoid even going to the tribunal? So that started with you telling me what it is that you needed and what it is that you wanted me to deliver. So keep that coming, guys. I want to make sure that what we're doing here is helpful and is relevant to you. Now, if you missed the Strategic Strata Litigator webinar and you do want to get access, there are 2 ways that you can do that. The recording of the webinar is now available for you to purchase over on our website. Rochelle and Mina have a link for you. You can purchase the webinar recording for $97 if you follow that link. That is if you're not a member. So if you're not a member inside our online community, the replay is there for sale to you. You can access that and you'll be able to watch it as many times as you like there through that link. $97 for non-members. If you are a member, then you have free access to the replay of the webinar. It is in our webinar library. A few of you are asking me about that. Amanda, are we going to be able to watch this again? I'm a member. Where do I find that? I put it in both the NCAT vault. So if you've got that link to the vault, it's there on that vault page. It's also in our members only video library, free access for you. There is a members link. Yep, I can see those popping in now. A members link to be able to access that webinar. Just make sure that you're logged in before you hit that link so that it will take you to the right place. Now, I've told you that the webinar replay for non-members, you can get a copy of that for $97. I don't know why you would do that, because you can become a member for just $67. So if you are wanting to have a look at that Strategic Strata Litigator webinar, plus all the other member benefits that you get when you join us on the inside, you want to head over to stratamembership.com. You can join us for $67 and you'll be able to access that member link to be able to watch that replay right back for free. Excellent. All right. Thank you for popping those in the chat, Rochelle and Mina. More of you coming on in. Feel free to say hi. Dave is here saying hi. How you doing, Dave? This week's podcast episode went out on Thursday. Some of you might have caught it already. Episode number 376. We are up to my chat with Rena. It's been a few weeks since Rena and I have had a chat on the podcast. We get together every few weeks or so, sharing our wins and our challenges. Rena brings us the perspective of the Strata manager, and I bring the perspective of the Strata lawyer. And often Rena's asking me to solve some challenges for her. And sometimes I'm bringing a challenge to Rena and saying, hey, Rena, how do you work with this in your business? Her business is called Strata Central, Strata Management Business in Sydney. And a particular challenge that we focused on was my question about why Strata managers seem to be, some of them, seem to be letting their agency agreements expire without notice to their owners' corporations and, as I've been saying, without realizing themselves that their agency agreements are expiring, leaving themselves and their owners' corporation clients without a formal, enforceable, valid written contract, which is what is required under our New South Wales legislation. And I spoke a little bit in the podcast episode about the very, I say, precarious legal position that this then places both the strata managers and the owners corporations in when they don't have a valid agency agreement to fall back on. And in the chat with Rena, I did refer to one section of our New South Wales Strata Schemes Management Act, which I just want to take you to now in case you might have missed that, or you might be hearing it when you are listening to the podcast in the next week. And I want to just make very clear what that section says, what it means, and how it impacts you. I'm just going to hit this button here, and you should be seeing on your screen here Section 50 of our Strata Schemes Management Act. So often in these sessions, I do like to do this to help empower you with information, with knowledge, to understand where this law is coming from, share the relevant provisions of the law with you, because I think this is helpful. It's helpful to me, certainly as a lawyer, and I think it's helpful to help to understand where these rules are coming from. So Section 50 of the Strata Schemes Management Act is the one that I talked about in the chat with Rena, the term of appointment for strata managing agents. And you'll see that we have 3-year maximum terms here in New South Wales. I've been answering some questions in our member forum lately from owners who have properties in different states, and then they come here to New South Wales, purchase a property, learning about strata, and I've been answering questions about these maximum contract terms. So that's another example where there is a maximum 3-year term for our strata managing agents. There are maximum 3-year terms on other contracts under our legislation as well. We have to reappoint a strata manager by resolution at a general meeting at the end of their appointment, so they can be reappointed. We need to have another resolution at a general meeting to do that. We can terminate an appointment in accordance with the provisions of that instrument, that's the contract, if authorized by resolution at a general meeting. And we can also extend the term of appointment. It can be extended by the Strata Committee for successive periods of up to 3 months after it would otherwise expire, but not for any period that would extend beyond the date of the next annual general meeting. So where a contract might be coming up for expiry, we know that we can only reappoint or enter into a new contract at a general meeting. We don't have a general meeting on the horizon. The Strata Committee can resolve to extend the term of the appointment. Now, this is the point that I made in the chat with Rena about giving notice, written notice of the end of a term. So that's written notice of the expiry of an agreement. A strata manager must give the owners corporation written notice of the end of a term of appointment at least 3 months before the end of that term and at least 1 month before the end of each extension of a term. So if your agreement is going to expire on the 31st of October, 2023, then 3 months before that, you should be getting written notice from your strata manager telling you agreement's due to expire 31st of October, letting you know pursuant to Section 50, subsection 6. In that way, you as the committee who should be getting that notice are aware this is coming up these 3 years. If you've got a 3-year term, you might only have a 1-year appointment. If you've got a 3-year appointment, they can go by very fast. And it can come as a surprise that it is time to either think about, am I going to renew or are we going to appoint a new strata manager? And indeed, this requirement, if met by the strata manager, reminds them that their appointment is coming up for expiry, and then it's time to think about, do they want to continue to work with this owners corporation, or do they want to let the owners corporation know we're no longer working with buildings of this type, or we've decided we're going to move on, or whatever the conversation is that needs to happen. The idea is to give everybody, each side, time to have that conversation. This is the part that's not happening. And I raised it on the podcast because it was about the 3rd time in this month that I have heard from owners, Amanda, oh my goodness, we've just heard that we're operating under an expired agency agreement. We didn't know, even the manager didn't know. It took everybody by surprise. So in my chat with Rena, we were talking about why this happens, how this happens. And indeed, Rena posed the question, is this requirement of our legislation that we have these compulsory terminations or compulsory expiries of agreements, is that fair and is it workable? Rena used the example that in other types of contracts, including in residential tenancy agreements, for example, where you have leases, if there's no expiry, then the arrangement just rolls on month to month until somebody does something about it. So Rena was questioning, why don't we have that kind of situation with our strata management agreements? Because it causes such a headache when this happens, that the agreement expires. It's almost like a guillotine. There is no opportunity. I say, as a lawyer, once it's expired, there's no opportunity to extend it. This provision to extend by the Strata Committee for successive periods of up to 3 months can only happen while the agreement is still valid. You can't extend an invalid agreement. And in the chat, I've invited anybody else and anyone here today, strata manager, strata lawyer, who has a different view about that, to share that with me, debate that with me. But I think if this provision that allows strata committees to extend agreements for 3-month periods must be invoked before the agreement actually expires. So we've got that provision in there, but otherwise, if the agreement comes to an end, it comes to an end, and there are some legal consequences for that. If an agent is continuing to provide services under an expired agreement, there's a real question about their entitlement to their fees under that agreement, their authority to commit their principal, the owners corporation, to contracts, to acts, to do things or not do things. It can cause a bit of a mess. And I see the mess, of course, from the angle of parties who are in conflict. So I might be approached by an owner who says, Amanda, I just found out our agency agreement expired. Whoopee. I've been wanting to get rid of this strata manager who I feel has not been performing. Now they're gone and there's nothing they can do about it. And then on the other hand, they have an agent saying, no, hang on a second, this expired by accident. I wasn't aware this was happening. This is not what the majority of the committee want. We're going to try and find a way to fix that. And I think you have to really bend over backwards and jump through a few hoops to be able to fix that in a way that is not open to challenge. So I was interested to hear from you if you'd had this experience before, if my feeling that this seems to be more common than it should be is well placed. I always hear from the top 5% of the top 2% of the top 5% of most troubled buildings, and I want to be to recognize that. But when I do see a pattern, it's something that I do prick my ears up and become a bit interested in. Angela is saying ours, I'm going to pull Angela's comment up on the screen here. Ours was renewed but not signed by committee members. Does that invalidate it? Well, our legislation does require, I'm heading back here to section, I don't think it's in section 50, I think it's in section 49, Angela, does require that agreement to be signed. I'll just find it for you. I think it is. Section 49 tells us about the appointment of strata managing agents, and the appointment is made by instrument in writing. So that means there has to be an agency agreement. That agreement has to be authorized by resolution at a general meeting. I can't see in that provision the requirement for signing, so that might be elsewhere. There's also relevant provisions in the Property and Stock Agents Act about how a licensed strata managing agent contracts with an owners corporation and make sure that contract is enforceable. So the signing provisions could be in there as well. The short answer to your question is, Angela, it doesn't necessarily invalidate it. That is the kind of question that you'd need to look to the circumstances of what was going on, what everybody wanted, what everybody thought that they were doing. And let me know if this is something that you've drawn to the attention of your committee and your strata manager, and if it's something that's being corrected and perhaps it's being signed sometime after the meeting. Good question. Thank you for sharing that, Angela. If anybody else tuning in or listening to the replay has an experience in this area to share, please do go ahead and share it with me. It is such a moving feast. Strata and strata living and strata law, we are constantly trying to keep up with what is actually happening on the ground. These provisions about compulsory 3-year terms and the inability to be extending and to be rolling over. You'll hear Rena and I talk about those being amendments that have been made to our legislation within the last few years, designed to protect owners, to make sure that they have a choice, to make sure that they're not automatically being rolled over into long-term agreements that they might otherwise have wanted some choice and some freedom of choice. But if the effect on the ground is that agreements are expiring without people realizing and there's no ability to fix that, then maybe that's an area that needs some reform. Peter is saying, as the manager works as an agent for the owners or committee, would any unpopular commands by committee to the unappointed agent invalidate any such action? I'm just going to read that again. The manager works as an agent for the owners or committee. Any unpopular commands by the committee to the unappointed agent invalidate. So I'm not sure if you're saying there, Peter, if there wasn't a proper agency agreement, if the agency agreement had expired and there wasn't a valid agency agreement in place and the committee had asked the agent to do things that were not popular, could those actions then be challenged on the basis that there isn't a valid agency agreement? Peter's saying yes. Yes. So that is exactly the situation that I get involved in, where I have owners wanting to come and see me and they say, Amanda, the committee's told the agent to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not happy about that. And I've just found out that there is no valid agency agreement. So the agent didn't even have any authority to do X, Y, and Z. Does that mean that those actions, those decisions, what the agent has done is open to challenge? And the short answer to that is yes, it is open to challenge if the agent has been acting without authority. So you just don't want to get in that situation, especially as an agent. And if you're a committee who likes their strata manager and wants to protect their engagement and wants to make sure that they're entitled to their fees and that the things that they are doing on behalf of the owners corporation can't be challenged, then you need to keep an eye on those expiry dates. I say practically you need to keep an eye on those expiry dates. Legally, the strata manager needs to keep an eye on those expiry dates because they're the ones who have to tell you at least 3 months before the expiry of the agreement, provide written notice that the agreement is coming up for expiry, and ask you, I would say, as a matter of good business practice, ask you, what would you like to do? Is it time to have a meeting? Let's have a chat. How you been feeling about our service? Would you like to continue? We'd really like to continue working with you. If you're thinking you might not want to continue, then let us know why. We want to understand where we might be letting you down. I would think as a business owner, in wanting to preserve your good relationships with clients, then this is a great trigger to be having that conversation. So Rena in the podcast said she's got some systems in her business that tell her, her software systems tell her when these dates are coming up. And the businesses where I'm seeing clients come to me with expired agreements that are surprising them, sometimes it is that smaller management company that perhaps doesn't have those systems in place. You're welcome, Peter. Patrina is saying, if a compulsory strata manager is put in by NCAT, does that have to be the case? So no, a compulsory strata manager's appointment comes to an end when the tribunal's order says it comes to an end. So the maximum term for a compulsory appointment in New South Wales is 2 years. So the tribunal may order anywhere from 6 months to 12 months to 2 years. You need to look at the term of the order, and that will say when the appointment expires. And then there's a series of things that need to happen in the lead up to the expiry of that kind of appointment. That's not in section 50 because it's a different arrangement. It's an appointment by the tribunal. From memory, it is actually in section 237 that sets out what is to happen at the end of the appointment. And essentially, a general meeting has to be convened for the purpose of the owners corporation resolving whether it's going to appoint a new strata manager or appoint a what I call a voluntary strata manager, as opposed to the tribunal's compulsorily appointed strata manager. It's a topic for another chat, Patrina, because if you have a close look at those provisions, they're a little bit grey in terms of when that general meeting should be called, who is calling it, what option do owners have to put motions on that agenda, because they're under a compulsory appointment. So really, the strata manager doesn't have to convene a meeting and doesn't have to take their opinions into account, but the meeting shouldn't be called after the compulsory appointment ends, because then there's nobody with authority to call it. Another example of some loopholes in our legislation that I believe do need to be fixed. Peter's, just one sec, I'm getting ahead of myself there. Peter's saying, one good reason to have officers' liability as a committee. Yep. Absolutely, yeah. If your agent's not there, then you've possibly lost one layer of protection there, haven't you, Peter? Sometimes I'm asked, Amanda, should we engage a lawyer to get advice on something, or should we engage an engineer to get advice on something? And I say, look, generally speaking, one benefit to having a professional involved in giving you advice is you've got another layer of protection, because if something goes wrong, or they've given you advice that hasn't turned out to be right, then you have access to their insurance. And I'm not out there advocating that you should sue your lawyers, but to the extent you have professionals involved advising you, it does give you that level. And again, it depends on the circumstances, depends on the particular action or inaction that's happened. But it can be a helpful reason to have a professional involved who indeed has their own insurance as well. Patrina saying thank you and yes, please. Session on compulsory management and what happens when it comes to the end of a compulsory management. Good question. Emiliana saying ours was intentionally left to expire then extended for 3 years during the AGM. That was also delayed and signed without the required quorum. Can we recover the management fees if this agent willfully did that extension? It even charged the owners corporation for the delayed AGM. Well, this is the thing, Emiliana, that comes up. Can we recover management fees that were paid under an expired contract? And the short answer is you might be able to. I don't know your particular situation. That sounds a little bit complex, but that is the claim that is often attempted, that we shouldn't have been paying these fees. There was no right. The agent had no right under the agreement to claim these fees. Now, that can be a hard case to make, because if the agent has been doing work of value, then even without a valid contract, the agent is, as a matter of common law, we say, entitled to be paid for their work of value. But you just don't want to get into the legal argument about it, do you? It's best to avoid that wherever possible by sticking by these procedures that are here in the Act to protect both sides. Okay, so many more of you coming on in. If you haven't said hi yet, please do give me a hi here in the chat. I would love to know that you're there. We've been having a great chat about the surprise expiry of agency agreements, strata managers' contracts, and what may flow when that happens. We're going to move on now, however, to some recent media. Hot story that has been flying around the last few days. It is something that my team and I try to keep an eye on, what's going on in the media. Sometimes when there's a particularly hot story, I get text messages from people who say, Amanda, have you seen this in the paper? This is interesting. Are you going to be talking about this? It'll be good to have your attention on this. A couple of emails, a few actually, emails that came into my inbox this afternoon after I sent out our invitation to join me here on live. And I mentioned that I would be talking about this story that had appeared in ABC News is the website that I am looking at. I'm going to share the screen with you here, I think. Do my best to do that so you can see what I'm talking about. Bankruptcies from debts linked to strata levies are on the rise, causing pain for apartment owners. So this is what I spoke about in my email this afternoon. I then got a number of emails in my inbox saying, Amanda, great topic. I've been thinking about this too. These are my thoughts on this. And I have to say, those that I was hearing from in my inbox had similar thoughts to what I have, and I'm going to share those with you. Saying hi to Leonie, saying hi. Petra's welcoming Leonie. Thank you. That's so kind. All right. So here's the story that you can see here on your screen. We've got a link to it if you want to read the whole thing. But in essence, Nikki is an owner who struggled to keep up with her quarterly strata levies. They were about $600 a quarter. She had a chat to her strata manager. There was a period of grace. There was a payment plan, but ultimately she wasn't able to keep up with those payments. And she says they ended up referring me to the sheriff. There was a special levy for a driveway. There was interest. There was legal fees and debt collection costs. These all added up, and she was taken to court. She says it's been traumatic, and she's just had days where she hasn't wanted to get out of bed. So sad story there from Nikki. The story then goes on to say that more corporations, I think that's meant to be owners corporations if we're talking about New South Wales, are taking legal action as a first option. And this is the part of the story that surprised me. I thought, oh, legal action as a first option when attempting to deal with unpaid levies. That hasn't been my experience as a lawyer who's done a bit of work in this space and certainly interacts with owners who are dealing with these kinds of situations. So strata companies, says ABC News, once again, that should be at least in New South Wales, owners corporations in WA. Strata companies is correct. Yes, in Queensland, body corporates can file for bankruptcy once the debt reaches $10,000. It's a low threshold, says Lodi Stewart, and it's a perverse incentive for owners, corporations, and their lawyers to take legal action as a first option to collect these debts because they can add their costs back to the debt owed. Now, you tell me what you've been experiencing, but in my world, when an owner comes to a committee, happens in my community, I see it happening with members in our membership community. When an owner goes to a committee and says, I'm going to have trouble paying this, often the special levy for the new waterproofing membrane for the driveway. The committee says, okay, what can you pay? And perhaps we can think about putting in place a payment plan. Now, it's correct, as this article says, that in New South Wales, that is not mandatory. An owner's corporation doesn't have to enter into a payment plan, but payment plans are definitely referred to as options in our legislation. Sometimes a committee will say, we understand that you won't be able to make these payments, so we're not going to charge you any interest for a period of time. The interest rate is high. It is set by the legislation. It's not set by the owner's corporation. It is 10%, relatively high interest rate, but an owner's corporation can choose to waive that interest. And it is only when dealing with owners who haven't been able to keep up with their payment plan, who don't respond to correspondence, who don't communicate with the strata manager, with the committee, or in communities where that money is needed in order to meet the owner's corporation's unavoidable legal obligation to repair the common property, to do a project. And if that owner doesn't pay up, then other owners are going to have to fund the shortfall. It's only in those situations that I see these kinds of proceedings getting to the level of commencing actual claims in a local court. Owners then have the opportunity to respond to that claim, file a defense. If judgment is entered and then the judgment is not paid, then one option for enforcing that judgment is to file a creditor's petition and to seek the bankruptcy of the owner. Absolutely last resort, not first, certainly not first option. So I'm quite surprised when I read that there are people out there who may or may not be familiar with the way Strata and Strata levy recovery works, commenting that they're seeing this as a perverse incentive, the availability of bankruptcy proceedings as a perverse incentive for owners, corporations, and lawyers to take legal action as a first option. Indeed, in our New South Wales legislation, there is a process set out that has to be followed before any legal action can be taken. And it includes sending a notice, setting out what the debt is, what the interest is, what the legal expenses are, and giving time for that owner to either pay the debt or to communicate to the owner's corporation about a payment plan. So there's a lot of steps in the lead up to even commencing legal action. And certainly filing for bankruptcy is not the first thing you can even legally do. You first need to bring that claim in a court and get a judgment that may be enforced ultimately by way of petitioning for bankruptcy. So the ABC News article tells us that this is a growing problem. And I suppose assuming that these statistics are correct and that we're seeing high 10% is the statistic here. 10% of all forced bankruptcies across Australia are apparently from strata levy debts. If that's something that's increasing, I would say anecdotally that the financial obligations of our buildings are increasing. So some people might say, oh, $600 a quarter or strata levies, they can't be that much. Surely people budget for these when they buy and they understand that they're going to have to meet these expenses. What I do see, increasingly so, are communities that are surprised by the need to swiftly raise significant levies to meet their repair and maintenance obligations. So we're getting some pretty good knowledge now among owners that the need to keep your building well maintained and repaired is a strict legal obligation. You can't get out of it. And we're seeing increasingly expensive repair works. We have quite a lot of red tape, let's say, around work that is done on strata buildings now, in some ways absolutely necessary and called for, but it's making the work very expensive. The work needs to be done promptly. We have aging buildings. We have the impacts of climate. And it means that many buildings, probably many more than 10 or 20 years ago, are facing these high bills. And that's what's taking these owners by surprise. And in some buildings, there might be a $20,000 special levy for one person. That's one person's share. They have to contribute $20,000 to the $1 million roof job, and it's money that they need to stump up fairly promptly. Those communities, hopefully, are exploring other options for funding this kind of work. They're looking at the option of a strata loan. It's definitely something that we've talked about on the podcast before, talked about on live. If you're wanting to know more about strata loans, then you can head over to our website and have a search through those podcasts. You'll see a number of chats that we've had previously about strata loans. So over at yourstrataproperty.com.au/podcast, just search strata loans and you'll get some information there about that option. It doesn't always have to be a strata levy when owners aren't able to fund that immediate payment. So other options are always worth looking into. I'm going to head over to, I might leave that article there because I have a couple of other things I want to share on the screen on that topic, some other commentary that's been happening in our space, and just head over to some comments here. Frank is saying Queensland strata law permits a discount of up to 20% for payment of levies by the due date. Yes, I've heard about that, Frank. However, to provide a 20% discount, the levies need to be grossed up first by 25% so that after applying the 20%, the body corporate receives the funds it requires. Yeah, I can understand how that works. If everybody pays up front, then we don't have enough. If everybody pays on time, then we don't have enough money in the fund. For a $2,000 quarterly levy not paid on time, the 20% discount translates to a $500 penalty. Pretty good incentive to pay on time, but unfair to those with a cash flow problem. Jennifer saying, good grief, what a system. Time to get out of strata property. Yeah, well, there's a few comments under this article that say the same thing, Jennifer. Jan is saying the levies in one building in McMahon's Point have gone up to $8,000 a quarter. And yes, I agree with you, Jennifer. That is huge indeed. All right, so what's the deal here? I mean, should owners who don't pay their levies on time be left to just not pay their levies? What are other owners supposed to do? What is the owners corporation as the legal entity which is owed the money? We have to remember that it is its own legal entity. It is owed money to be able to pay its bills that it legally has to pay. What is the owners corporation to do if ultimately suing an owner all the way to the end of the line being possibly bankruptcy proceedings, if that is so unpalatable and if that is so perverse? This discussion, because of the publication of this article, has been going on in our circles for a little bit this week. And I think I've got here to share with you a post on LinkedIn from the president of Strata Community Association New South Wales, Stephen Brell. This is his post. I'll make it a little bit bigger. It summarizes what I guess is the position of SCA and strata managers on this issue. And there are a few points worth mentioning here. Strata debts, it's a delicate balancing act, says Stephen. Cost of living pressures, it's inevitable that the focus is going to shift to levy arrears. Stephen said he's seen firsthand how the issue affects owners and owners corporations. It's more than just a legal or financial issue. It's an emotional and ethical conundrum. At the heart of the matter lies finding the delicate balance between being empathetic to lot owners who may be financially struggling and ensuring the owner's corporation has the funds needed to maintain the property and provide essential services. And as a lawyer, I feel it's important to continue to remind those who are commenting in this space that that is a legal obligation. It's a legal obligation. And I am every day acting for owners in buildings where that legal obligation is not being met. And their building is saying, we don't have the money. We don't have the money to do it. So we think that's a good enough excuse not to be fixing your leaking roof. We think it's good enough for you to live in a wet, moldy apartment because we don't have the money and the owners don't want to stump up the cash. The bottom line is, from a legal perspective, that is not a good enough excuse. The tribunal is going to order that building to do that work. Not having the money is not an excuse. So the dilemma, says Stephen, owners corporations and professional strata managers are often faced with the difficult task of enforcing levy payments to fund essential and legislative requirements. So Stephen makes that point too. Fire safety, insurance, general upkeep. Failing to adequately fund not only puts strain on the financial resources, it can lead to a loss of amenity or non-compliance. That is non-compliance with the law. How can the community tread this line effectively? Clear communication. Yep, absolutely. Open communication is key to managing strata debts. Transparent lines of communication, notifying them of any outstanding debts, discussing potential repayment options. And you'll see in New South Wales, there is a process set out in the legislation to facilitate that happening. I'm not sure if Stephen mentions it here, but I think in this communication piece, there's also the discussion before the levy is increased, before the special levy is struck, this discussion about what is the best way to meet these expenses. Is a strata loan an option that's going to ease that burden on owners? It's going to spread out the payment over a longer term, smaller payments, longer time. Yes, there will be interest payable on that loan, but if it means that people can stay in their homes, then maybe that is the better option. And some investor owners might find that even financially, when you're looking at tax deducting interest and things like that, that it's a better option for them as well. Everybody should be going off to get their own separate independent financial advice about what option is best for them, special levy, strata loan, and they may be surprised that a strata loan is a good option for most. Flexible payment plans for those who are suffering genuine hardship, mediation before taking the step of legal action, engaging financial advisors. Owners might benefit from getting a financial advisor. There was a story, oh gosh, time goes so fast. Was it this year? Was it last year? Where very similar to this story that we've now seen in the ABC News, where owners were faced with a very high special levy to fix windows at their building. They received some bad advice from a lawyer who said, just don't pay it. Just don't pay it. And of course, those owners were ultimately the subject of levy recovery proceedings and ended up with interest and costs and all the sorts of additional fees. And it was reported, I think at the time it was the Sydney Morning Herald, and the journalist eventually got a comment, I think from Stephen as well as myself, on that story. It's the same thing, this misunderstanding that you can just stop paying. That is always the worst thing you can do when it comes to strata levies, just stop paying. What ended up happening with these owners in that story, and why I mention it looking at Stephen's point, is that they went off and got some financial advice, and they were able, as I understand it, to get some support from an advocacy service, from a financial service that I think particularly worked with seniors or retirees, and they were able to get some funding. And that is something that should have been an option for them straight up, rather than stopping paying their levies. Community support, communities to help struggling lot owners come forward with their issues earlier. Sometimes the solution lies in pooling community resources. Look, I agree that there needs to be a level of understanding, a level of empathy, definitely communication. But at the end of the day, the owner's corporation, as I keep saying, has a legal obligation to pay its bills. It has a legal obligation to repair and maintain its common property. And it is absolutely a difficult, can be heart-wrenching situation where your neighbor, your friend, your fellow member of the committee can't meet that debt. But I think there's certainly in the ABC News article, there seems to be this call for simply letting that lie, accepting that it is unfair to have to call on those owners who are suffering hardship and to have them meet their legal obligations. I'm not sure that's where I land on that particular topic. So yes, community support to an extent, but at the end of the day, as one of our previous guests on live and on the podcast has said, Michael Tees, if you can't afford it or you can't afford to repair it, then you shouldn't own it. So those are helpful, I think, and well summarised comments there from Stephen Brell, the president of SCA New South Wales. The other comments that I wanted to share with you, and then I'll head over to that chat where there is a lot going on over there, come from our friend Jimmy Thompson in his Flat Chat newsletter, which I think just came out this morning. So I didn't actually pick this up. I do subscribe to Jimmy's newsletter, and I recommend that you do so as well. I didn't pick this up until I had sent out my email, and someone had pointed out to me, oh, Amanda, did you see Jimmy's talking about this on his website as well? And Jimmy, as we know and love him for, does get quite passionate about certain topics. And he starts by saying, look, I know I get oversensitive about this, but I hate it when my colleagues in the fourth estate make lazy assumptions about strata. So he talks about the ABC article about a woman who was doing it tough. He says ABC TV, so perhaps this was on TV first and I missed it. She didn't pay her levies for 4 years. Eventually, and I say understandably, her neighbours called in the strata debt collectors. The clear implication, Jimmy's got a rant there, which you head over to his website, you'll be able to read, is that the Owners Corporation or Strata Committee are somehow at fault. Did the story mention the fact that other owners in the block had been collectively carrying this debt for 4 or 5 years? Of course not. And again, Jimmy also mentions that story about the elderly couple earlier this year who were facing levies, back fees, because they didn't want to pay a special levy when the building had its windows replaced. Jimmy mentions the poor advice that they got. Did the story mention that strata owners have a legally enforceable duty to maintain and repair the common property? No, because that would have ruined a good human interest yarn. So go and have a read further of what Jimmy has to say. That's his website, Flat Chat there. Check that one out. I'm going to head over to these comments and see what you have to say here on the topic. Scrolling back up. Leonie saying we now self-manage again, and I brought our levies down by 30%. Awesome. We have a really great podcast episode coming out. I think it might be scheduled for next week on the topic of self-management, Leonie. So you'll probably enjoy that. And those of you who are thinking you might want to dabble in that area are going to get a lot out of that podcast chat. Jennifer's asking Leonie for some more info on self-management. Jennifer, tune in to next week's podcast. Henry's saying, hi, Amanda, each situation needs to be looked at in its individual basis. Yes, it is necessary to recoup levies and to raise money. However, people in their homes are at the center of this. It would have to be a nasty individual who would resort to taking a neighbor to court as a first response. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that, Henry. And I don't see it happening. I don't work in this space. I don't act for owners corporations in levy recovery. I have in the past. I certainly see the other side of it when I have owners coming to me saying, Amanda, I need to deal with this situation. I cannot say that I have ever been critical of an owners corporation or a lawyer who I think has taken action too swiftly or hasn't communicated or hasn't given the owner an opportunity to enter a payment plan, to make arrangements. I don't think any community, it would be kind of a sick, dysfunctional community that really wanted to be in litigation with fellow owners and to be, yes, the expenses are recoverable, but they have to be paid first by the owners corporation. So why you'd want to be incurring legal fees in the first instance dealing with this, and if you didn't have to, if it wasn't a last resort. I think that's where this article is a little bit in la la land. And as Jimmy says, it's a nice one for clicking on, but not necessarily accurate and reflecting what we're all experiencing. So yeah, I think good communities are looking at each situation on an individual basis and making those assessments. But at the end of the day, all owners are responsible as members of the owners corporation to contribute to the liabilities, to the debts of the owners corporation. And if one person drops out and says, I ain't doing it, I ain't paying it, then it means that everybody else has to pitch in. And is that fair? Is that fair? When everyone bought into this community, seemingly with the same understanding, the same knowledge of their legal obligations, and that could be part of the piece here, that people are not buying in, understanding that they have these legal obligations, are not understanding there could be special levies, are not understanding their unlimited liability as a member of an owners corporation, and the inability to avoid these debts, and that they can ultimately be pursued all the way to bankruptcy if they can't pay these debts. Perhaps that's the education piece that's missing at the beginning and why owners are getting caught by surprise in these situations. Peter's saying it would very much depend on the reason levies were increased. For example, for legal obligations, yes. So if you're having to raise money to pay your insurance premium because insurance payment premiums are going through the roof, that's an unavoidable legal obligation. We must have building insurance. If you're raising money to repair and maintain common property, as I've said, that's got to happen. It can be painful when you're having to raise money for things like legal costs. If the owner's corporation is being sued by an owner, or the owner's corporation is taking action against an owner for any number of reasons, and there's a big legal bill to pay. Often when I'm attending meetings for owners and emotion like that is on the agenda, that's when there is discomfort about having to contribute. Why should we be here? Why are we in legal proceedings? How did we get here? It's not as clear cut as the roof is leaking. So yeah, we get it. We're going to have to pay. Henry's saying absolutely the key is communication and compassion. Yep. Jennifer saying it would be interesting to check the number of matters going through the FCFCOA, Federal Court for see it. Give me more, Jennifer. Jennifer saying, thanks, Henry. I wish you could talk to some of the owners in my building. Yep, indeed. All right. So I think that's what I wanted to show you on that topic. If you're coming around having a listen, if that's one that's pricked your ears up as it has for others in our space this week, let me know what your thoughts are. Some comments that came through to my inbox this afternoon, very much along the lines of, it's a duty of the owners corporation to repair and maintain, to pay its insurance premiums. This is in our legislation. This is unavoidable. The only way to fund these obligations is by raising levies, and a lot owner has a duty to pay their levies. There is a provision in the legislation for interest, but that interest can be reduced or it can be waived, and that's one way of respecting and recognizing an owner's hardship. Also, it is would you prefer to be in a community where the committee just decided not to chase anyone, not to chase anybody's levy debt? So I've seen communities like that, I have to say, and those communities then have hundreds of thousands of dollars of levies owing, and everybody who is paying, who is able to pay, the levies are having to be put up because they're having to cover for, to subsidize, to bankroll, as my email subject line was this afternoon, bankroll their neighbors because their neighbors won't pay. I don't think that's a fair situation to be putting other owners in. So let me know your thoughts. Jennifer saying the Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia General Division dealing with bankruptcies. Yes. So Jennifer saying interesting to check the number of matters. So I would imagine that that's what ABC News did, Jennifer, because that's where our, as you seem to know, that's where our creditors' petitions end up, and where our bankruptcies may be ordered. So I think they've looked at those stats. I don't know if you were here earlier when I shared the table in that ABC News article, but I think we've got a link here for it if you want to go over and have a look. And special levies must be in a different category. Oh, they wouldn't be they're not in a different category for levy recovery. No. So it's a very good point. How many are like our article subject, Nikki, I think it was, who have defaulted on their $600 a quarter levy, and how many have defaulted because it's the $20,000 special levy? That's a really good point. I doubt that the federal court would have that kind of data, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So as a matter of law, if you haven't paid a levy is a levy is a levy in the eyes of the court when it's looking at levy recovery. And there's really no excuse for not paying levies, to say, oh, it's a special levy and I didn't expect it, or it's a special levy and I didn't. I don't think we should be paying it, not good enough excuses to get out of that obligation. Okay, now, some of you may know that earlier this year, I became an approved provider of CPD training for our New South Wales strata managers. CPD stands for Continuing Professional Development, and our strata managers who are licensed here in New South Wales, I know that's not the case in other parts of the country, shockingly, don't need to be. Strata managers don't need to be licensed, but here in New South Wales, our licensed managers have to do a certain amount of CPD education during the year in order to meet the conditions of their license. Now, managers can't just go anywhere to get their CPD. There are compulsory topic areas that have to be covered, and those compulsory topic areas can only be delivered by an approved CPD provider, of which I am now one. And to that end, I have some exciting news to share with you. Now, it was shared for the first time broadly on the podcast this week. Not sure if you have caught that yet, but the news is this: I am hosting a one-day CPD education event in February 2024. And I am inviting our New South Wales licensed strata managers to come along and tick off their compulsory CPD hours. Now, not only do you get to tick off that requirement by spending a day with me, and also some very special guest speakers that I'm going to tell you a bit more about in just a second, you can also do it in a gorgeous location. The Your Strata Property one-day CPD event is being held in Mudgee. That is where I'm sitting right now, here in my home studio in Mudgee, and I would love to see you, our New South Wales strata managers, here with me in Mudgee to show you this beautiful town. Now, I'm going to take you over, pressing some more buttons, driving the ship here today, take you over to share some details of the event. Now, we'll give you this link. It will go into the chat in a moment. This is the place that you can go if you're a Strata manager interested in spending the day with me and some special guests on the 23rd, Friday, the 23rd of February, 2024. Head over here to book your spot. Now, you'll see at the top of this page, there are strictly limited spots available. And that is because it is a legal requirement that when we do CPD training in a face-to-face situation, we can only do so to a very small group. So that's why the spots are limited. I would love to have more of you joining me, but for the time being, that's what the law is in New South Wales. We have to have a very small group in the room when we're doing this kind of training. So I'm calling it, this is the Strata CPD event of the year. It's the opportunity for our Strata managers to escape the overwhelm and master your Strata challenges with me in Mudgee. So on this page, more details here about the event. I don't know if you know, but here in Mudgee, we've been awarded Australia's top tourism town 2 years in a row. So it's a cool town. Let me know here in the chat if you've been to Mudgee. I know a number of you're often telling me that you are familiar with it. When I showed this picture actually on the webinar last week, many of you said, I know that intersection, I know that clock. I love Mudgee. So it's only 3.5 hours drive from Sydney, the perfect place to focus on you, on your expertise, your growth, and your connections. So if you're tired of the same old CPD programs, which I know I do hear from some of our Strata managers, saying, well, we're just ticking a box, we're just getting it done, it's not all that engaging, it's not all that interesting, then this is the event for you to come from, to access my no holds barred. You guys know me, you know what I'm like, no holds barred teaching style, delivering what you need to know. No sponsors, no trade booths, just top quality education. Mudgee is a beautiful space for new ideas, new energy, taking some time out for you. The event is on a Friday. You then have the weekend to yourself to explore this really cool town. We have more than 35. That was the last stat I could find online, but I'm sure it's more than 35 cellar doors. This is wine country here, Central West, New South Wales. We've got walking trails. We've got awesome hatted restaurants here in Mudgee. So much to do to fill the weekend escape. And if you want to meet like-minded professionals, you are someone who prioritizes connecting with other high achievers, those who take the time to invest in themselves, in their expertise, because you know that is going to benefit your clients and then benefit the profession as a whole. This is the space to be doing that. Michelle is saying, would love a similar event for keen and interested Strata owners. Okay, look, I put the call out here, didn't I? Tell me what you want and I'll see what I can deliver. So if you're looking at this event going, oh, looks really cool, would love to spend a day with Amanda in Mudgee, but I'm not a Strata manager, I don't need CPD. I'd really love an event for owners. This might be the trial run to run the Strata manager event and then be able to set up the event for owners. I love that idea. Jennifer saying, great idea. Henry saying, love Mudgee. I heard they have a really great brewery there with a genius master brewer. Wonder which one that might be. Michelle saying, Mudgee, international Hollywood fame and fortune for the film The Nugget. What year was that, Michelle? Hit me up. What year was that? That was a while ago, wasn't it? Join us at the Strata CPD event of the year for our Strata managers who are keen to know what it's all about. It's all here on the page. There is a link. I think it's gone into the box, comment box for you. yourstrataproperty.com.au/CPD event. You get all of your compulsory learning hours done for the 23-24 CPD year. This is for class 1 and 2 licensed Strata managers. These are your compulsory hours for your license requirements through fair trading. I have special guest speakers. They are coming up on this page. I'm going to show you who they are. If you're hanging out for that, your day is fully catered. We are hosting the day's education at the barn at Blue Wren Farm. Anyone been to the barn? Let me know. Angela's saying, this is a great idea. 2002 was the Nugget, Michelle. Got it. I thought it was a while ago. 2002. The barn is just 8 minutes out of Mudgee Town Centre. It's gorgeous. It looks just like this. If you saw on the page a couple of weeks ago, I posted a little video, had some snapshots there of the barn. They have gorgeous food that's going to be provided for you, seasonal local produce, your every need catered for during the day to make sure you are switched on, raring to go, and taking in all that the day has to offer. Some beautiful gardens to wander around there at the barn as well. Once the day's learning is wrapped up, we're going to move on. It's time to party. We're going to Low Wines, and we've secured their wonderful event space. You can see this snapshot of it here, the Pavilion. Some of you may have been to events at the Pavilion. Many of you have already let me know. Love Low Winery. It's one of the more famous wineries in Mudgee. The evening celebrations will happen there. This is where country charm meets premium regional food and wine. If you've been to Zin House, which is on this same property, you'll know the glorious food that Kim Curry produces. Zin House is the Hatted restaurant here in Mudgee. Awesome place for special occasions, and that food all provided for us at the Pavilion on the evening. Watch the sun go down. Look at that stunning Mudgee landscape and slip into the weekend, which is yours to explore. Bring along a partner, bring along +1, a friend to dinner. That's absolutely, there's absolutely space for that. And those who have booked in so far are booking in for the weekend with their partners. So that's awesome. I said we've got limited spaces. The last time I looked, we were almost 50% sold out. So our pro members, who this went out to first of all, and then our members a couple of days ago, this went out to. I mentioned it briefly on the podcast, as I said this week. Those who are really keen to be here are taking my advice and are jumping in and securing their spot. All of our attendees get a special gift when they come to the event on Friday, the 23rd of February, and we have an exclusive Facebook group that all attendees will have access to for their accommodation suggestions, restaurant recommendations, and sightseeing tips. Getting hot tips from a local. That's me and my friends being able to make sure that you get what you need to have a great weekend. So over $6,797 in value in all of that, but that is not what you pay. This is our pricing here that's coming up on the screen. If you are a member, then you can secure your access for one payment of $1,997, or there is a 3-pay payment plan. We've been talking about payment plans. I know all about payment plans. That is there for our members as well. So there is also non-member pricing. You'll see that here on the page. But here's the thing. Nobody should be buying these tickets at the non-member rate. I've just opened up that page, but I don't think I can share it with you. I'm only sharing the one page at the moment. But if you were to hit that non-member pricing, you'll get taken to a page that says, you know what? You can secure a membership for $670. That will immediately reduce your ticket price to the member price. And you're not only saving $800 on your ticket price, you're then getting a year's access to the membership as well. So it's kind of a no-brainer to snap up that membership at the same time as booking your member ticket. So that option is there for you on checkout. So as I said, almost 50% sold out. We've only been open on this for 4 days, and this is the first time that I've gone out publicly to the wider group with this detail on the event and letting you know the booking link. So I'm not expecting those remaining spots to last for long. If you are a New South Wales licensed strata manager wanting to do your CPD, or you've done your CPD, but you just want to come spend a day hanging out with me and my special guests, then this is the place to be. Who are our special guest presenters? Here they are, being revealed to you. Rita Van Alst, of course, strata manager extraordinaire and my often co-host on the Your Strata Property podcast. I'll be there for sure. I wouldn't miss it. Michael Tees. I've secured Michael Tees to join us at the event. You would have heard Michael here on live. You would have heard him on the podcast. I have strata managers often telling me, Amanda, Michael is the most frequently quoted podcast guest of yours at my general meetings. I'm often using his line. If you can't afford it, don't own it. Michael will have a lot of value to share on the day. Helen Cowell, strata lawyer, partner at SWAB. Helen is a gun on the Design and Building Practitioners Act. That is one of the compulsory topics for our strata managers to be covering. So I've invited Helen to bring her expertise to the day. And Dr. Nicole Johnston. Again, a special friend of the show here. Dr. Nicole has for many years been focused on research in our strata space, producing some really influential reports, particularly in relation to building defects. Her report a couple of years ago really kicked off this whole discussion about the building defects crisis. Through her company, Strata Knowledge, she's continuing her good work. So lots to bring to our one-day CPD event in Mudgee. Those are our special guests. You want to jump in? We're already hearing from those who have, these are those who even before I announced the event were saying, Amanda, book me in. Those people are now booked in and secured. It's my hometown. You can read a little bit there about our transition from Bondi to Mudgee. This is where my home is, my Sydney office I travel back and forth to, as many of you know, but that's why I can give you an awesome experience here in Mudgee. So yourstrataproperty.com.au/CPD event is the link for you to get to this page. Have a look at it, jump in, don't wait too long is my advice to you. February is a long way away, but I wanted to make sure that you had every opportunity to plan for this, to be able to know that your CPD hours are covered by me in February and to jump in. And what's happened is many of you have taken up that call and booked in your spots. So can't wait to see you all here in person in Feb. Let me know if you have questions. If you're coming to the event, let me know. You can post here on the page. We would love to hear from you. And if to the extent that there are seats left as we progress throughout the year, I will be letting you know, reminding you about the event to come and join us. Michelle's going to be there. Come and meet Michelle. She'll be supporting me on the day. Heading over to these comments, Jennifer saying, great idea. Saw that one. Talking about strata managers here. Jennifer saying, I agree with Henry's comment about communication, but how to achieve that? Yep. Whole nother topic, isn't it, Jennifer? Communication, communities, the C words of strata. Alrighty. That's all I got for you. That's all I got for you today. Hey, public service announcement. I'm going away. Today was officially my last day in the office. I am heading overseas for a month. Tomorrow we head to Sydney to be able to go to the big airport, jump on the big plane, and I am going to be traveling in Spain and then heading to Ireland to catch up with some family. I will be away for a month, but you know what? Come with me. I'm taking you with me. We will. I have every intention of continuing our Friday chats, probably a little bit shorter. Gosh, we've gone for more than an hour today. Probably a little bit shorter, answering strata questions for you. I'd love to bring you to Spain, show you around, see what you think, and have a catch up. How does that sound? No promises as to the time. I was looking at the time zone. I'd be getting up, I think, at 7 a.m. to have a chat to you at 4 o'clock your time on a Friday. We'll see how we go. Friday Live might be a bit later, or it might be another part of the day. But you should see my head here on the Facebook page, on YouTube, if that's where you're joining us from, on my LinkedIn page, catching up with you at some point each week over the next 4 weeks. I will be traveling. I am not doing client work, and many of you contacted me after the webinar saying, Amanda, come and help me at NCAT. And you know that my availability has been pushed to October, which is filling up. But I will be in our members Q&A forum, as I am most days there, answering questions for our members. It's something that I do love to do, and I'm more than happy to continue doing while I'm traveling around, lucky enough to travel around various parts of our world. I will see you somewhere, sometime, from some country very soon. Enjoy your weekend in Strata. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye for now.